Hello, and welcome to a special little mini episode of Spartalk. So, following on from the previous episode on Mamdani and how to make sense of his victory, I have gathered a couple of comrades from the Just Break Already caucus in the DSA to talk about what exactly to do in the DSA. So, Mamdani is now the mayor, but so far he's refusing to do things that would be in the interests of working people. So, we're going to discuss how do socialists fight to make this happen? How do we hold Zoran Mamdani accountable? So to talk about this, I've got with me comrades Cassian and Natalie. Hi, comrades.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So you guys have a nice little leaflet. I'm looking at it right now on Instagram, and this is something you guys put out in the lead up to a meeting of the DSA in New York that happened this past weekend. And it's called Try to Hold Zoran Accountable in Action, Ditch Tisch and the Taylor Law. So I guess my aim in this discussion is to ask you guys to help us, first, why do we need to hold Zoran accountable? And two, how to do that. So either one of you take that away.
Yeah. Obviously, the position of the JBA is that the DSA needs to have a clean break with the Democratic Party. That said, a lot of caucuses in the DSA, now that Zoran's been elected, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and kind of a hysteria around him, right? But they say they want to hold him accountable. So we're saying, right, test that, right? Let's see if you can do it. Let's see if on these basic questions of socialist defense, Zoran can actually be, moved by the DSA. So, we're saying he should fire the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, who is a known Zionist, has a, very horrible track record of, protecting murderous cops, just terrorizing working people. She's a member of the 43rd richest family in the United States, so very much part of the capitalist class. And it would just be basic to get her out of there, to protect working people and really, anyone in New York City for that matter. And we're also calling on him to appoint a commissioner who's going to open all police archives and jail killer cops. And we think, right, like these are super basic, super straightforward measures that would be to the immediate material benefit of working people, minority people, people in the DSA for that matter. And if Zoran is going to stand for state secrecy and keep a commissioner who protects the people who murder us, I think that says a lot about which side of the class line he's standing on, where he is. Simultaneously, we're also calling on him to refuse to enforce or support the Taylor Law, which is a strike-breaking law. I think it was passed in 1967 that criminalizes all public employees' strikes in New York State. This is just another basic measure. I think any leftist of any flavor should admit that if you support strike breaking, then you want to break the power of the organized working class. And while it is a New York State law, so from a in a bureaucratic sense, Zoran can't overturn it. What he can do, as the person who runs New York City, is refuse to enforce it and fight publicly for its repeal. And we think that, again, that's just a really basic measure that could be employed in defense of the working class. And if he won't do that, then I think we know where his loyalty lies, basically.
Mm-hmm. So coming off this meeting that you guys recently attended and you guys tried to distribute this leaflet, as I understand it, what was the reaction to your arguments? Because they do sound commonsensical. So how did others in the New York DSA react to what you're pushing forward?
Well, in my experience, everyone that I spoke to directly actually really liked the leaflet and thought that that was a kind of a doable idea, or at least something that we should try, because the anger at Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch seems to run really deep. And the Taylor Law, for those who know what it is at least, is very significantly hated, especially for the labor organizing people. Unfortunately, however, the organizers of the conference sort of stopped us from distributing leaflets very abruptly after we gave out a certain amount at the door. So I guess at least the local leadership was not very happy about it, but a good deal of members liked the idea. I guess that's what I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, mixed bag in terms of, I guess, the results of what you guys were fighting for there. Like, okay, we've got some of our views out there. They seem to have hit a chord with the, I guess, rank and file people, but there's a real obstacle.
Yes, I would say that that's definitely correct. I
Mhm.
would go so far as to say that the New York local leadership really does not want to hold Zoran accountable
Mhm.
at all.
I
They want just support for him,
Mhm.
while the
Yeah.
membership might feel differently.
Yeah. So, I had a conversation with comrades from Workers Vanguard in the previous episode, and we did touch on a little bit about like the need to hold Zoran accountable because, in
Mhm.
fact, DSAers, the rank and file of DSA, they do want this, right? I think it's a
Yes.
question of how exactly. So maybe one of you could explain, like, what does it actually mean to hold this guy accountable, and why is that really important, rather than either just standing on the sidelines and denouncing him for being capitalist, pro-capitalist, whatever, or Democrat, why is it important to hold him accountable if you're trying
Uh,
to fight in the DSA for the DSA to actually become a real fighting force and actually?
well, I could continue. I
Mhm,
think that it's extremely important because, here's this man that the DSA membership considers to be an elected representing the DSA, and he's running the biggest city in the United States. But if he's not held accountable, then, there's no reason that he can be expected to do the agenda of socialists
mhm,
or to do anything that would serve the working class whatsoever.
mhm.
He's been meeting with a lot of big landlords and Democrats, even Trump,
Yeah.
recently, which was a little bit crazy.
Mhm,
And if he is to be, even remotely socialist as a politician, then he needs to carry out these really quite minimal demands we're asking of him. Especially now when there is some hope among at least the left in New York City that, this guy represents some kind of positive change.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. Um, um, I guess my other question would be, you guys are called the Just Break Already caucus.
Right,
And
right.
the main thing that you guys fight for in the DSA is for the DSA to break, like organizationally, politically, break from the Democratic Party. So, um, could you motivate like how that general aim of making that break with the Democrats, how your current tactics towards Zoran and your fight in the DSA is linked to that broader perspective that you have inside the DSA.
Yeah, I think I would talk about this in two directions, I guess. On the one hand, right, if these demands, right, if the DSA and the left were able to hold Zoran to account on these things, I mean, these things would actually run directly up against the Democratic Party line. Um, they, are obviously anathema to organized labor. They love to strike break. AOC, Biden, all of them spiked that rail strike a couple of years back. Um, and obviously, like for in New York specifically, for example, I mean, it's been a Democrat-run city for decades, and none of them have certainly ever wanted to give an inch on state secrecy, opening police archives. So in that way, right, it does try to push Zoran across and break with some real Democratic hard lines. Um, on the other hand, I think right, it seems that the DSA is in love with Zoran Mamdani. And some people are maybe a bit more cautious about him, but still, people are generally enthusiastic that he was elected, I would say. Um, and the left, the masses, the working class, they learn through experience. I
Mhm,
think that it's really important, right? Because obviously the betrayals of AOC, the betrayals of Harris and Biden weren't enough to motivate this clean break. But I would say, right, test this program of accountability in action. And when, if and when Zoran does not move on these things, right, let that be the lesson consciously that we're saying, you can draw from this now, that he is not going to turn away from this program of class collaboration. He is not going to break with the Democrats. He's not going to break with, liberalism or the capitalists, right? And actually try to, in the course of struggling to hold him to account, right, learn from the experience, learn that this break is necessary. And I think that in general, like those two things would be the main aims of this tactic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really nicely put there.
That was very well said, Cassian. And then I just wanted to add that ultimately the point of the clean break is to advance the interests of the working class and a left that serves them. And so, anything that is going to do that is most likely going to help lead for a clean break and vice versa. We're interested in really a lot of different measures and methods to achieve these kinds of goals. And we want there to be a better New York City for workers and a better country for workers and a better world for workers.
Yeah, for sure.
Also
nicely put. Yeah. Also nicely put. I think, as you were saying, Cassian, about Zoran, not coming out on the right side of the class line, right? So Tisch obviously is a really gross example. I think the latest is he's come out and endorsed Hakeem Jeffries. What's been the reaction to that inside the DSA?
I mean, from what we observed at this conference, it's been silence. I mean, maybe there's some grumbling from the membership, but really, and I don't want to get too much into it, but just to talk about like the organizing conference a little bit, like there was a very, very tight lid kept on everything. The panels were basically, they were set up in such a way, taxing the rich, Department of Community Safety, all this stuff, as if Zoran's program is a given, right? We're doing this, following this. And what like audience participation there was, it was just like panels of experts, pre-prepared talking points with about maybe 5 minutes of Q&A at the end of every round. So it's very much like, all of these things that Zoran's doing, either people are moving very quickly to apologize for them, or they're just trying to not talk about them at all, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, because it puts them in a tough position, right? Because Zoran has been putting that difference between himself and the DSA. But it seems like the DSA leadership, or I don't know, maybe even the rank and file members, are kind of just trying to ignore this dynamic, and they're just like, onwards and upwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I will say that online on the social media or the forums, there's a little bit more discussion of it, but it's mostly kind of vague disbelief and people emphasizing the need to hold him accountable, I would say, to see what this will mean. It seems a little bit, people are a little confused.
Yeah. I think similarly, after his meeting with Trump in the White House, I mean, they generated a lot of good memes, but there was that confusion and the sense of like real betrayal, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing this. Like, why is he even like in the same room as Trump, etc. But I think it's to try and really look beyond the appearances and see like, okay, well, what's driving them to have this sort of really jovial camaraderie almost, so to speak. Okay, cool. Well, look, I wanted to have you guys on so that we could talk a little bit about what the fight inside the DSA needs to be right now. And I do think the fight should be to hold Zoran accountable, but then there's accountable and then there's accountable, right? Like it's actually I guess what you guys are trying to do, and which I do think is a really smart tactics, is trying to put him on the spot to show in front of the membership and in front of people in general, like what side he's going to fall on, And once he makes those decisions, then you can say, well, oh, look, okay, well, Zoran said this, but, having Jessica Tisch run New York City police, one of the most brutal in the country, well, that's not really a good look for a person who calls himself a democratic socialist. So, what lesson do we draw from this? And I think that's the fight that needs to be constantly and continuously waged inside the DSA to knock some heads together and push the fight for complete break, as you say.
And one of the things that I want to emphasize is that about some of the demands or elements of his program that he ran on, such as free buses, childcare for all, and rent freeze. These things are somewhat minimal enough that, maybe he could achieve them even under his current mayoral reign. But I think what we need to emphasize is that if look at the larger pattern of what he's doing and who he's serving. And so it's like if he achieves these things, is it really because he serves the working class? Or is it a few lesser patches that won't fix the whole problem while he's actually serving the other class by working with people like Jessica Tisch or
Band-aid
continuing to enforce
measures,
the
yeah.
Taylor law?
Right, some
Yes,
Band-Aid
exactly.
measures on like a, really bad situation. That's enough to sort of keep things at bay, keep things from getting much, much worse. But they are what they are, and I think that's what the left needs to see them for. I mean, these would be good Band-Aids, I'm not going to turn my nose up against free childcare
No,
or free
certainly not.
buses, but yeah, look at the bigger picture. And to be honest, like, look, this is New York City we're talking about. So even for a fight to have those things, which are, it's not revolution, it's not that, but I think even to have those things, it really does mean that you go up hard against the vested interests in New York City, and that's no easy task, and that's going to take real political courage, and that's going to take really, a solid fight. And I think the whole question
Yes.
is Zoran up for that fight? Like, okay, fine, he had a nice campaign, fine, lots of people like him, but again, to bring it back to, like, I guess the whole question of holding him accountable and, deploying tactics. It's like, right, so let's do the thing. Let's put our money where the mouth is, and fight for free childcare. Let's see how far that gets you. And
Also,
in the course of that, show how he's not doing that.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, Natalie, go ahead.
sorry, Carson. Can I just add really quickly? It's a little bit of DSA inside baseball, but I think it's important for people to know. Recently, Zoran has started a nonprofit called Our Time to serve his campaign agenda while he's in office. And the New York City DSA has been pushing a lot for people to join this nonprofit. And there's a lot of complaining that they're expecting to carry out his agenda through this organization instead of the DSA, which he is allegedly leading and a member of as an elected. So the reason I think this is important is, so do you want to go hold him accountable by joining his nonprofit and doing whatever he wants? Or is it better to lobby through the DSA to hold him accountable with the measures we're talking about? I'd like to pose that choice to people.
Yeah, I mean, really, in tandem with that, I think it is so important, how you fight, right? And that's why it's important that this fight to hold them accountable is carried out, within the DSA and also within the broader left and hopefully the working class, because like to actually achieve these measures, as you said, Mansa, like you have to go up against all of these vested interests in the city. And Zoran's whole strategy for achieving these things, I mean, like there was a panelist at this organizing conference who was talking about Zoran's tax the rich agenda and actually talking about free childcare as it happened. And basically the conclusion they drew was that we need to let Zoran do whatever he wants, and actually that's probably going to mean increased taxes on even the working class, and we just have to be prepared to swallow that because that's how fiscal policy works. And it's like, so we're going to get, quote, free childcare on the one hand, but on the other hand, actually an attack on working people to do it, right? So it's like it's this very, very contradictory and honestly, very dangerous road of like to actually get these things and to actually get them in any kind of way that is a benefit to working people requires real class struggle, requires the DSA, the left holding him accountable, requires mobilizing the working class and not just relying on, them moving money around in the city budget, because that's going to end up one, discrediting socialism in the eyes of the workers, and two, not actually, I think, advancing any of these things that he claims to fight for.
For sure. And to bring it back, I think this goes right to the heart of why your demand number 2, repeal the Taylor law, right? Because if you are interested, the question of methods of how you fight, like you really need to unleash the power of the working class in New York City. And the Taylor law is one giant chain that shackles that. So yeah, okay, cool. I think that for me is quite helpful in terms of seeing what concretely the fight looks like in the DSA right now. You know, instead of all these debates, or instead of just going totally swimming with the flow of Mamdani mania, I think it's really to try and draw some what we call red lines, you know, and to force Mamdani to take positions that will then show people where, you know, what side is he really on. So I appreciate you guys helping to motivate how you guys are trying to do that in the DSA concretely. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to say before we wrap up the conversation?
Just to any, if any DSAers come and listen to this, take these demands and raise motions in your branch meetings. You absolutely have the power to try to push this through democratically. And I won't tell you the wording for those motions, but I would say, like, raise it, fight for it, because you can actually pass these things. You can actually do these resolutions, right? Ideally in a democratic organization, and you should try for it.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Also, if you want language for the motions and would like to collaborate with us, please reach out to Just Break Already on social media. We are at Clean Break now on X, and I think we're also something like that on Instagram, or you can just search Just Break Already.
It's at DSA_Just Break Already Instagram. Yeah. Well, look, I'll link that stuff in the show notes. But yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, do get in touch and do some joint work. I think that's one way to try and hold Zoran accountable, or figure out, what accountability looks like. Maybe we've got it wrong, but let's at least have that debate. So,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, on that note, thank you guys so much for coming on to explain to us what's going on in the DSA, and importantly, what should socialists be fighting for right now in the DSA in New York under socialist Mamdani New York. So thanks.
Well, thank you, comrade.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us on.
Yeah, cheers. All right, okay. Well, hopefully hear from you in the not too distant future about how things are unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.